Hi, I'm re-recording mixer Larry Benjamin, and this is my partner, re-recording mixer Kevin Valentine.
Hello.
Hey, Kevin. Hi. So when we were mixing the scene, we had the opportunity to mix it in theatrical atmos. And this scene in particular, this pit, this flashback scene to the pit, lent itself really, really well to do some unique, discrete things with the Atmos channels. And Kevin, you can talk about what you did with effects, and I matched what you did in terms of treatment with reverbs and such. But down here, I mean, you've got like water dripping. What other kinds of elements did you have rolling here? Effects?
We had I had like an eerie wind, and even though there probably wasn't any there, and the flapping of the tarp, which was a combination of Foley and effects, but it was just fabulous.
Yeah.
And the drips were effects. And I think Larry and I kind of matched a small verb to emulate that cement box he's in.
Yeah. Exactly. We want to kind of make it seem like he was a little bit more enclosed than the set would show. But Jesse is down there, is getting blinded by the light as Todd pulls the tarp back. But Todd was above him, and visually that lent itself well to really utilizing Atmos in a really great way. So, and Vince was at first not sold on this, but what we did is we put Todd completely up in the ceiling speakers because he's physically above Jesse, and then Jesse is coming out of the center speaker. And I love the way this is framed. The way we see Todd is just kind of like through the bars and there's Jesse below. So here's an example of where Todd is strictly coming out of the upper speakers, the ceiling speakers in Atmos, and Jesse is in the center speaker. And then what I did is, as Todd would talk to Jesse, I kind of ramped in and out of the reverb to make it sound like he was, just above, outside of the real world, and then talking through the pit, where we put some of that reverb on it. And Kev, you can talk about this wonderful Foley.
Yes, it was great. The Foley team did such a fabulous job on this. The cigarette being hoisted down on that string, not only was the clip Foley, but also they did a channel of the string rubbing on the bars, and obviously it wouldn't make quite that much sound, or practically any sound, but it sounded so beautiful and realistic as he's going up and down. I watched it this morning. It just made my morning just to see that.
Yeah, there's so many details, and Foley really plays like another role in the film. But this is that example that I was talking about. So, Todd keeps kind of panning his head off, from talking outside into the exterior of the world and then down into the pit. And then I kind of varied the amount of reverb based on the positioning of him. And then when we cut to Todd, then I kind of centered him up and had him in the same center space as Jesse. But I really wanted to kind of sell the superiority of Todd where he was physically over Jesse. We got to utilize that Z-axis that Dolby Atmos exploits, kind of that three-dimensional height aspect of things.
And what was interesting, Larry, I know that we panned everything as we saw it on the screen, panning-wise, left, right, up, and down, but even though we had them in the same locations, something had to do with the dialogue and mostly the Foley, where sometimes it didn't seem like it was in the same world. So I know we had to adjust out of what we did in our pre-dub just so they felt like they were in the same world, because sometimes they didn't.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it would seem a little disembodied, even if we were synchronized in terms of our cuts and when we would do things. But we had to, when we married up together, make sure that things sounded, kind of glued together. And I remember Vince, we were mixing this on a big theatrical stage, and Vince would kind of get up out of where he was sitting, which was just directly right behind us, kind of sit from our position, go to the back, and then realize, okay, this is working. I'm not sold on it, but I think it's working. So yeah, it was kind of fun.
Can you believe that he lived down there for all those months? I'm Louise, this is Donna, we're back, hello.
And there comes Jesse, finally out of the hole.
So nightmarish. And that top he had on, we had to have it made because it didn't exist anymore, and it had to have different stages of aging because we couldn't wash it. He had 4 or 5 for each stage of aging, which all had numbers in, so we knew which stage it was, so the costumers would get the right one on the actor.
And this was his dirtiest stage.
Yeah, it was. It's fairly
because he's
horrible.
been down in the hole.
Yeah. And the thing about this is you can't wash them at the end of the day. You have to keep each garment, each stage of aging exactly as it is. So poor Aaron had to wear very smelly stuff, though we sprayed them a lot.
But luckily we had multiples so that he could have a fresh, customized dirty
shirt. We had about
shirt.
14 of those, didn't we?
So
there'd be like 4 of each stage so that he wouldn't be too smelly.
it was great.
Yeah, it was fun.
We had a good team.
My name is Khanikian, VFX supervisor at Rodeo for El Camino. So in this scene, you're going to notice that we have the compound background behind Jesse as he's opening the fence. What we did for this sequence, since the compound itself is a long-lost location, it doesn't exist anymore, we built the fence and the foreground dirt and part of the road on set, like behind the studio in the backlot, basically, with a giant green screen behind. And then we completely built digitally the compound behind Jesse and Todd. We were there on set, and we took a lot of measurements because Jesse and Todd were in front of a green screen with the fence and the partial road that was built. So we took the green screen out and replaced it with the fully digital compound behind our fantastic actors.
I'm Andrew Smith. I was the gaffer on El Camino. We shot in Albuquerque. And here we are in the basement of Todd's house. As you can see, it's a day interior.
There used to be water.
We added the glares that are on the wall on either side because it's a very dark basement. Even though it's pretty bright outside, we added light outside to give you some kind of glare on the wall inside. Otherwise, it would feel pretty lifeless in there. Even though it, should be lifeless because it's Todd's place. Here's the truck cap, which was a great prop. Bad for the actors because it's really hard to get through that doorway. Unfortunately, we never shot them getting it out that doorway. And then putting the cap back on the El Camino, it's a little bit of a dance because it took a little while to get it sort of into place. One of my favorite scenes in the movie takes place in Todd's apartment when Casey discovers Jesse under the mattress. And it required quite a bit of coordinated movement between myself and Paul, the operator, because he had to move the camera in and I had to light him at the same time. And it basically came down to revealing the muzzle of the gun first so that the movement would draw your eye from the gun to his face. So in the next shot, you'll see when he is parked under the bridge in the Fiero, you will see in the wider shot, we had street lamps, and we added those street lamps. The art department was great. They carried them around, and they placed those street lamps wherever we want. So in this shot, specifically, what I pay attention to is the light in his right eye. We're always trying to get a little bit of wrap on him, which that's what we call the fill. He's keyed from the camera right side. And basically everything you're seeing in the background there was practical, meaning it was there. It's a train yard in Albuquerque. And you can see the street lights we placed. Actually, if you look, you'll see there's 2 of them on the right side of frame. One we put there and one exists there. They're right next to each other. And in this frame, you'll see the street light comes on. And of course, that's an electrician magically turning the street light on in Vince's direction. The color temperature you see inside the car is sodium vapor, something we add to the light because it gives it that industrial look.
Hi, I'm Melissa Ng, and I'm Vince Gilligan's assistant. I love the street sign in this shot. It's a shout out, Holly and a Rose, to Holly Rice, Vince's longtime partner and the coolest girl in the world. A piece of trivia is that I got to do what I thought was a temp voice in the earlier press conference scene, but ended up staying in the movie, so thanks, Vince. This shot that's coming up was originally supposed to be a Steadicam shot. Our brilliant A-camera operator, Paul, shot this, but the Alexa 65 camera that we were using was so heavy, it was hard to keep up with Aaron running across the street. So we ended up using a contraption with 2 big wheels called a rickshaw that Paul rode while he operated the camera, and our great grip Eli steered for him. This is the actual apartment building location. We rebuilt Todd's hallway on set and Todd's apartment, but all of these stair shots are in the actual location. Vince does a ton of preparation and homework. This shot right here through the stairs was something he had pre-planned. When we were scouting the location, he likes to take a lot of photos and place people where he might want them in frames. The plants on this floor were already in the building, but the plants on this floor were placed by our art department so that there could be a ficus right where Vince had written it to be. Because this is the actual location, we couldn't really move much around, so Paul was jammed into a corner with his camera, and he was the one cueing Tom to come down the hallway. I remember Vince walking through with Tom to show him kind of the pacing that it would take to get down the hall and give Aaron enough time to break in. The amazing Aaron Paul obviously couldn't see Tom, so he had to really just find his rhythm and pace it out so that he could make it inside just in time. Our video village was located right behind this door in this apartment that Jesse's breaking into, so we were all there at the monitors, holding our breaths each time with Jesse and hoping that he would make it just in time.
Hi, this is Mark Johnson. I'm one of the producers of El Camino. Charles Neuwirth, another one of the producers I've known for 30 years. Melissa Bernstein, another producer I've known for 15 years. And then there's Vince Gilligan, the producer-director, who I've also known for some 30-odd years. The irony is, here we are making a feature together, which is what I wanted to do with Vince 30 years ago when I met him in Richmond, Virginia. His dream then was to write and direct features. Television wasn't in the card, certainly not at that point. And here we are finally making a feature, Vince's first feature, after having become probably one of the, if not the most accomplished and lauded television creators, really ever. And TV schedules are so jam-packed. And not that feature schedules are that much easier, but you do have more time. And we say in theory that you need to get about 2 minutes of usable film every single shooting day. Vince's inclination was to move faster. And not that I told him to be lazy, but I did tell him, take your time, make sure you've got it right. And the same thing applies, quite frankly, in the editing room, because you don't just cut it in 2 or 3 weeks and walk away. You take months. And this movie just got better and better. I have to say, a lot of my notes probably had to do with feature expectations. And, as I said to Vince constantly, a lot of your audience for this movie will not be that familiar with the show, if at all. And he originally said, but I'm making it for the people who love the show. And I said, no, you're making it for a lot of people who don't know what they're about to watch and find it entirely enjoyable. And that's what we ended up doing. But I think my notes, which probably frustrated him both in the development stage and in the editorial stage, had to do with don't assume that your audience knows who these characters are or what's going on. And I couldn't have been more aware of it than when we did this particular scene. I don't know what it is about this scene that triggered that, but I kept on saying, oh, my God, we're making a feature. Vince Gilligan is directing a feature. And it's so quintessential Vince Gilligan. Here we have this black humor moment. We have the belt that Jesse Plemons' character was using to strangle his housekeeper, and he's putting it back on to hold up his pants. So, God forbid anything should be out of order.
This is Judy Rhee. I'm the production designer on El Camino, and I have some thoughts I'm going to share with you about Todd's apartment. When I first read the script, it was, I was very excited to do his living space because we haven't seen it before, and he's such an interesting character. So aside from Candy Welding and a couple of other sets, this was the one that I was most excited about. Todd is a very unique character because he's a combination of a Boy Scout sociopath. And although he has this sunny and respectful demeanor on the surface, who wants to please and do a good job for his employers, he's also this cold-blooded killer that does whatever needs to be done to fulfill his duties. And, as Vince once said in one of our discussions about who Todd is and what we wanted to show in his space, that he is someone who wouldn't think twice about helping a little old lady cross the street, which is very funny because that's exactly who he is. And, but we also know that he has this other sinister side. So, in thinking about what his space needs to look like to show both the contradictions of his personality and also in keeping with who he is without it being too over the top was an interesting challenge. And in thinking about his space, I started to explore those kinds of themes of things that were sunny and cheerful. Like for me, it was elementary schools and classrooms and Easter eggs and Disneyland. And also the other elements that I wanted to sort of convey was a sort of male adolescence that he has. That's once again reflects a version of Arrested Development. And also Todd has money at this point. So how has he spent his money and what did he buy for himself? And so all those things needed to be shown in his space and in the most subtle and layered way possible. That was an interesting challenge as well. The pegboard that you saw in his kitchen cabinet doors, that was a direct link for me in terms of memory to childhood classrooms of elementary schools. So I brought that layer into his kitchen. The Easter egg colors, I started to think about his palette and what would be representative in his space, starting with his sort of more open public space of when you first walk in, which would be his kitchen, his living room, and his den, to maybe express more of the pause Easter egg dies that you used to get in grocery stores. And once again, that is a memory from my childhood, as well as from Disneyland. I remember there was this ride called It's a Small World, but that dining room or the kitchen bench and table that has the Bavarian cutout motif somehow was lifted from that memory for me. So those were different elements that I discussed with Vince, and he liked the idea of the pause colors, the pastels, and then it's starting to get darker as you move down the hallway into his bedroom, and his bedroom would then reflect a darker inner life. And that was a reference from anatomical medical charts that Vince also really liked. And we get to see that at some point in when Jesse explores Todd's bedroom. You'll also see his snow globes, which we started to discuss with, with Vince and Trina and Mark Hansen in the prop department of what would his personal hobbies be in his private time. What does Todd do to relax when he's at home? And so this was actually Vince's idea, to the snow globes and how those inner workings of each snow globe would reflect a kind of a darker, slightly comical, but definitely black humor version of who Todd is. And then the scorpion chair was a reference that Vince had found that really spoke to him. So we had that fabricated as well, as you'll see in one of the shots kind of in the background. It's not heavily featured, but you do see it.
Nobody would ever find it. Nothing beats cash on him.
Hi there, this is Skip Macdonald. I'm the editor from the movie, and I just wanted to run through the sequence a little bit with you to give you some different insight on how things were played out here. This is shortly after Jesse gets into Todd's apartment and discovers he needs to find Todd's new secret hiding place, and he has no idea where it could be. So he is slowly, methodically looking, and he's trying to do it by very little light here. And I believe this lighter wasn't an actual butane lighter. They had to run a tube to it, so he had a little more time rather than having to keep the butane going the whole time. Here, he's going through Todd's room, and I tried to make it feel like he had a pattern that he was going through with the room, searching from one side to another, so he wasn't jumping from place to place here, and kind of had where he was going and what he'd already looked at. In here, I'm sure you're going to recognize this is the same tarantula from the series Breaking Bad, so kind of a throwback to there. And in here, he's just looking, and he's all the detail that's here, the glove and the little Post-it notes and stuff. And here he's continuing to look because he had stored the meth in the underneath the sink, so I'm sure that's a reason he's back here looking on this. As he crawled under the sink, he bumped into some of the plumbing, and there was a slight jiggle, so that was something we needed to freeze so it didn't feel like it was going to fall apart or give you the vision that it was cheaply done. And just trying to make sure he doesn't overlook anything and just methodically go through. The later montage you'll see later is very hectic and chaotic, where this is just, I'm going to find something, I don't know where to look, so I'm going to tear everything apart. This is a section here where I had reverse printed some pieces to make it feel a little more lengthy, and this was a tricky section to cut because it was just trying to decide when do we reveal the actual parents on the TV, which was a sequence that we had to pre-cut so we could play it back on the day so we didn't have to burn it in or anything. And as you see, he finally realizes his parents are there. He's coming in here, flipping through the channels, which was also a pre-build, so we could have the flashes and no audio and all that kind of stuff going through that would be built later. So he finally tunes into it, and just watching the parents, their heartbreak, trying to get Jesse to turn himself in, come home, and everything's going to be okay kind of a thing. But this was a delicate balance for me to make sure that we see the parents and how distraught they are, but then also see the heartbreak on Jesse when he's listening to what they have to say and trying to decide what he should do or how he should get into this. But it was really fun to cut this because of the emotion of both sides, but trying to make sure we played it in the right sequence of events and the right amount of time on both sides to see all of their emotion.